Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Next, this is really interesting to me. Jeremy Corbyn has not suitably condemned the leadership of Venezuela, a leadership that looks from the outside to be dictatorial and profoundly oppressive. Because it is ostensibly a socialist regime, it's been a particularly interesting country. It's actually a kleptocracy, but it began, I suppose, with socialist dreams. The daughter of the former president has got $4.2 billion in the bank. So there's, I mean, if that's socialism, then I'm a banana. But because it was held up as an example of how a country rich in natural resources, Venezuela has a lot of oil, can somehow use that money to benefit the entire population rather than just the usual kind of tiny subset of wealthy people. It has drawn a lot of attention from around the world in recent years, including Jeremy Corbyn. He's spoken very warmly and very positively about Venezuela in the past, which is why it's collapsed into near anarchy, and the new president's pretty much dictatorial approach has called for many to insist that he condemn it. And he kind of hasn't. He said he's done that thing he does when he was asked to condemn anti-Semitism, where he says, I condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of racism and bigotry. He doesn't single out the issue that he's been asked to comment on. He does a kind of blanket condemnation of all bad things ever. So asked to condemn the behaviour of the Venezuelan government, I condemn the violence on all sides. And I kind of just want you to tell me what you think is going on. I didn't hear Theresa May being ordered to comment on President Erdogan and his sort of pretty much close to a coup that has been undertaken in Turkey, the jailing of journalists. I'm pretty sure she went there, didn't she, to talk trade after visiting Donald Trump. And similarly, Duterte in the Philippines is embarked upon a regime that I think stands comparison with the one in Venezuela, but no right-wing politicians are being ordered to condemn that. And I don't think I'm indulging in whataboutery, because what I want to really work out is why Jeremy Corbyn and Venezuela are being portrayed in this way in the media. I wouldn't have thought it was very difficult for him to come out and say, yeah, this is absolutely awful. The fella's clearly an absolute monster. Sooner he's given his sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap, the better. But he hasn't. Suddenly, you have British tabloid newspapers that I suspect, and I only say this because I would struggle to find Venezuela on a map, arguing that it's an issue of epic importance. I want you to tell me what you think is going on, because I just have a suspicion that it's a bit like that new Musical Express interview, you know, where Jeremy Corbyn said he was going to look into the amount of debt that a lot of ex-students have for their tuition fees. And then about a month after the election, it was held up as evidence that the man's a complete liar and not to be trusted at all, because he hadn't sort of doubled down on something that he hinted at in an interview with the NME. I have no dog in this race, oddly. Politically speaking, I'm truly agnostic at the moment. In a proper general election, as in a presidential type election, I don't think I'd be able to vote as it stands at the moment, because there's no party leader that inspires confidence in me. So this is not an inquiry. This is not a question born of bias or particular interest. This is a genuine attempt at objectivity. If we're being truly objective, then why on earth is Jeremy Corbyn being ordered by right-wing newspapers to condemn President Maduro of Venezuela? Just give me your line on it. You can be as kind of box fresh or as conspiratorial as you want. You know, just if this is my sort of new dream in a way, my new ambition is consistency, to treat everybody the same. It's going to be really tough to do, but I think someone's going to have to start trying. You have to hold people to the same account. So I can't quite get my head around. And because, I'm often perceived as having sort of quite leftish leanings, sometimes fairly, sometimes not. I wish this was the other way round. I wish it was the media going after the Labour politician, going after the Conservative politician, and then I could sit here and say, why aren't they going after the Labour politician? But we are where we are. It is what it is. Jeremy Corbyn is being bombarded with demands to condemn the Venezuelan government. I don't quite get it. Do you? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Liam Fox, as Mark points out, isn't being ordered to condemn Duterte. Theresa May wasn't ordered to condemn President Erdogan in Turkey when she touched down there shortly after he'd bunged a bunch of journalists in jail. Here's the thing. I hold no candle for Jeremy Corbyn. Not just because of Brexit, but for a whole bunch of reasons. I am far from converted to the cause. I'm conscious of how wrong I got it in the run-up to the general election on this programme. How completely wrong we were to portray his core support as a sort of lonely band of hippies and idealists. That simply doesn't bear out. People under 45, including some serious taxpayers, voted for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party at the last election. I'm not on board. Whether I should be or not is probably not of interest to anyone except me. But I'm not on board, but I don't like unfairness, and I don't at this point understand why Jeremy Corbyn has been hit over the head with Venezuela every single day, while equally toxic regimes elsewhere in the world are being held up as potential trading partners for our post-Brexit desperation to do deals. Turkey, the Philippines, maybe? I don't know. But do you get it? Do you see what I'm saying? Why is he getting it in the neck over Venezuela while, we're cozying up to a man in the White House in America who is essentially on a lead that is held in the Kremlin? 0345 6060 973. The one silver lining of the political chaos and disasters that have swept the Western world in recent years, the one silver lining is that it means a lot of our previous preconceptions, a lot of the things that we thought were just true, are turning out not to be. The left-right divide, I think, is dwindling. It's kind of withering on the vine. Faisal Islam, the Sky political editor, has written a really good piece on the Sky website today about the Hacienda generation, which is great. Because I'm getting bored of being described as being in Generation X. No one knows what that means anymore. But the Hacienda generation are emblematic of a worldview that doesn't really fit into traditional left-right divides. These things are shifting. Unfortunately, the windows and the doors are also being opened to white supremacism and proper textbook fascism. But normal people, nice people, decent people are feeling their sort of political affiliations shift. And I find it fascinating that Jeremy Corbyn now strikes such terror into the hearts of the right-wing media establishment that if he goes on holiday and his holiday coincides with the anniversary of Passchendaele, that's proof that he's some sort of quisling or traitor. And if a government in Venezuela embarks upon policies that look pretty dictatorial and oppressive, if he doesn't come out and specifically condemn them himself, then he's guilty of what? Do you know? 0345 6060 973. I think, and I'm going to need your help with the history on this one, I think there is a case for saying that he has questions to answer with regard to Venezuela. He has spoken for years about how it is a model of socialist government, and the fact that it's fallen so fast so far means that if he doesn't turn around and say, well, I did like it then, or I thought they were going to do something good, I can't possibly endorse what's happened subsequently. I think he looks like a hypocrite. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I also found a tweet this morning, I don't know if you've seen it, that he sent out in presumably last year or early this year. I'll dig it out for you, because this seems to me to be hypocritical, and I haven't kind of had any big bust-ups with fully paid-up Corbyn fans in recent weeks. I don't really want to have one today, but he wrote, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. That was in the context of Theresa May refusing to condemn Donald Trump's refugee ban. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And then when asked to condemn the government of Venezuela, he kind of said, I condemn all violence on all sides. If he's trying to stay neutral, isn't that trying to stay neutral in a situation of injustice? You can't say that there's equilibrium or equality between two sides when one's in government and one isn't. You can't oppress from a opposition position. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Well, I think that Jeremy, at this point in proceedings, 14 minutes after 11, about to open up the phone lines, I think by his own moral code, Jeremy Corbyn is guilty of epic hypocrisy on the Venezuela story. But that doesn't mean that the weight and the scale of the coverage of his Venezuela connection is remotely fair. Is there enough there for you to chew on? I think there is. Is Jeremy Corbyn being a hypocrite with regard to Venezuela, or worse? 0345 6060 973. I put it to you cautiously that he is, but it isn't going to keep me awake at night, because I don't understand why the same questions aren't being levelled at other British politicians with regard to other regimes with whom they cosy up. Theresa May was holding hands with Donald Trump, you know, actually holding hands with him. You struggle to describe his regime as being in any way comparable to that of Venezuela, but you have to bear in mind some of the uglier stories that are emerging from the White House. If he says, Jeremy Corbyn, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And then he refuses to condemn the Venezuelan government. I don't think we've ever done a phone-in about the Venezuelan government before, but there's a first time for everything. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And there's plenty of phone lines free as well. The combination of speak to Sadiq and this sort of unexpected veering off towards South America means that if you hit the numbers now, you've got a better chance of getting through than you will any other time this week. 0345 6060 973. Doesn't mean you'll get on air. You've got to know what you're talking about. Don't just ring in and start spluttering. Why are they going after Jeremy Corbyn with regard to Venezuela on such a big scale? That's the thing I want to unravel. But then on the moral question of whether or not he's been hypocritical, yeah, hugely. 0345 6060 973. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. After quite a lot of pressure, Jeremy Corbyn has responded to the current situation in Venezuela, where sort of near anarchy, they're eating animals out of the zoo, okay, and they're eating their own pets. A country that's rich in oil reserves, and the daughter of the previous president, who Jeremy Corbyn often cheerled for, has got $4.2 billion in the bank. So, look, number one, that's not socialism. Number two, I don't see Theresa May being ordered to condemn the executions that are about to take place in Saudi Arabia. 14 young pro-democracy protesters, and we're still flogging them weapons. So I get the whataboutery and I get the hypocrisy, but two questions. Why is Jeremy Corbyn under so much pressure on this issue? If you're a fan or a foe of him, an admirer or a skeptic, give me your analysis. 0345 6060 973. I'd like to ask the question of why no one's ever allowed to criticise him for anything in some quarters. Let me just have a quick look at my inbox and give you an example. Here you go. And now at Mr. James O.B. jumps on the overcrowded LBC bash Corbyn for hypocrisy bandwagon. Well, I bash lots of people for hypocrisy on a daily basis. And I suppose sort of people who aren't that fond of me would probably argue that I usually bash right-wing politicians for hypocrisy. So get lost. Is the short response to that. That's Corbynism in a nutshell. Why won't he just say nice things about our man? He's really good at slagging off the other lot. Why won't he just say nice things about our man? He's really good at holding other politicians to account, especially the ones we don't like. He's really good at pointing out the hypocrisy of Tories. Why is he pointing out the hypocrisy of Jeremy? That's not fair. That's so bovine and so stupid and so damaging to political discourse. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on the side of consistency, objectivity and truth. And here is something that is consistent, objective and true. Jeremy Corbyn is a hypocrite when it comes to Venezuela. You can't dine out on what a wonderful country it is, and when they start eating their own pets because they're so bloody hungry, stay silent and condemn both sides for their violence. Do me a favour. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. Call me now, tell me what I'm getting wrong. 0345 6060 973. And it's also because he casts himself in this messianic way that I think the accusations of hypocrisy carry more weight than they do with politicians who are quite open about the fact that they've got to do a little bit of hustling. Boris Johnson talking about Saudi Arabia. Well, look, OK, yeah, they might be sort of killing Yemenis, but if they weren't killing them with our bombs, they'd be buying them from someone else, and we need the money. I mean, it's absolutely criminal in a moral sense, but they say it out loud. Jeremy Corbyn attempts to cast himself as above this kind of thing, and then when they start killing each other in Venezuela, about 90% of the deaths are opposition protesters. He condemns the violence on both sides. Anna Karina, crikey, I thought I'd got a Tolstoy novel on the phone, is in Epsom. Anna Karina, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
I come from Venezuela. My family is all there, and the situation is horrendous at the moment. People are dying, people are hungry. All the industry that we used to have is completely destroyed. It was no Maduro, but the president before he came, expropriated people from their farms, factories. If you have two houses, he's going to say, you are not allowed two houses, we will take one away. and people are suffering at the moment. And the reason why I think Jeremy should condemn what is happening is because he is being on the Venezuelan television talking to the president.
Talking to the current president or the last president?
Yes, no.
To Maduro.
To Maduro.
Yeah, Maduro, sorry.
Yes. Talking to the president and saying how he supports the way he runs the government and the country without having an insight of how people are suffering, how many people are dying, how many people are disappearing every single night because the army comes and takes them away. So he said...
yes, because he has essentially given such a vote of confidence to the regime in the past, he can't...
Sure.
He doesn't get a free pass on this one by saying, oh, they're all as bad as each other, I condemn all violence.
Exactly. He was on... Maduro usually have a program on the television where he talks rubbish for hours and hours and hours.
Should be a radio host.
Yes, and he had a call from Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy was...
When was this?
Fabulous.
When was this?
It was not long ago.
Well, how long?
If you look in YouTube, the call is in there. Unfortunately, it's in Spanish, as you will know, and he was trying to speak Spanish as well.
Well, Corbyn was trying to speak Spanish to...
Yes.
Okay.
To Maduro. So, unless it's a fake, but it's well publicized that he is a huge supporter.
Yeah, but even if it isn't a fake, it's perfectly plausible. He has spoken in the past about his support for the government. Why do you think
the situation is pretty bad at the moment?
Yes.
Probably, and you don't say it in the news because it's at the other side of the world, but people are dying. The children don't have anything to eat at the moment because there isn't anything in the supermarkets. You can't find milk, you can't find toilet paper, you can't find anything. It's bad. Things are bad over there.
I kind of obviously can't really expect you to answer this question in a short period of time. I suspect a PhD thesis wouldn't do it. But if I had to ask you why Venezuela has had such a disastrous few years, and you had to point at 2 or 3 main reasons, what would you say? Because you get people saying it's being held to ransom by corporations, it's being sabotaged by the Americans. I'd love to hear from you as a Venezuelan why you think the country's gone off a cliff.
Before the socialist government took over the country, it was a very profitable, very rich country. The whole of South America was very envious of the way people live in Venezuela. But when this new government started, they started to privatize everything. They took away property from people.
Privatize or nationalize?
Nationalize.
Yeah, that's quite a crucial distinction. So it proves I'm paying attention.
For example, my family had big cattle farms, big production of.
So you're very wealthy Venezuelan.
Yes.
Okay.
But the government came, and my parents they picked up their business from nothing.
Yes.
So they didn't have anything when they started. And when they got their land was taken away.
So they've kind of appropriated a lot of land, a lot of business, tried to run it themselves, and made a mess of it.
What they did, they have a big farm. What the government did is that they say, we will take this away, we will give it to poor people. Poor people came, they built their own shanty town, but they didn't work the land at all. So there isn't any farming industry anymore.
And that would hold true, in your view, across a broader spectrum of the country. So they've attempted to bring stuff into public ownership in order to use the profits to redistribute the wealth. And, I mean, whether it has failed due to corruption or incompetence is for the historians to judge. But the fact that Chavez's daughter has $4.2 billion in the bank suggests that it wasn't really a socialist utopia from the start. Do you understand? I mean, I know you've kind of answered this already, but do you understand why so much attention is being paid to Venezuela and Jeremy Corbyn in Britain? It pains me to say this, but if it wasn't for Jeremy Corbyn and the allegations of hypocrisy, we wouldn't be talking about Venezuela at all.
Because he during the campaign, he was saying that he likes the Venezuelan socialist model.
Yes. He has, yeah, you're absolutely right. If he stood up and said this is a really good thing, and then it turns out not to be, he has to be held accountable for his previous opinion.
So if he likes the model, then he is saying that he agrees with what is happening at the moment. And he's agreeing with how many people are dying, and he's agreeing with all the...
Well, no, he's not. He's condemning the violence on both sides. But as he said himself, if you seek neutrality when people are being oppressed, then you're on the side of the oppressor. Anna Karenina, I hope we speak again. I have this wonderful gift that you give to me when I open up my phone lines and speak to someone so sort of personally connected. But of course, she doesn't speak for all Venezuelans. She speaks for quite a specific section of the Venezuelan population, which will be those who have been quite deliberately and definitively divested of some of their wealth and business by a avowedly socialist government. Here's the thing. This, to me, right, is 2017 in a nutshell. I think he's getting a kicking from the right-wing media because they're terrified there's going to be a general election in the autumn and nothing stuck in the run-up to the last one, OK? There is no other explanation for why you would be encouraged by people in my profession to get cross with Jeremy Corbyn about something he didn't really say in an interview in the New Musical Express while giving a free pass to Theresa May for abandoning, I think, every single policy in the actual published manifesto. Some of them abandoned before the general election even took place, between, you know, manifesto and ballot. Just put that, seriously, put all your tribal loyalties, all of your political instincts, all of your beliefs and opinions to one side and tell me how on earth you got two political leaders, one can get a kicking for something he didn't actually say but kind of alluded to, and if you put in the implication and inference, then you can accuse him of having said that he would wipe out student debt. He didn't say that. He said he would look at it, but he didn't even put it in his manifesto. It was in a New Musical Express interview that nobody noticed until a month after the election. You tell me how much weight and attention in your world has been given to that story about him, and then tell me how much we are still talking about the dementia tax, about school meals, about the resumption of the ivory trade, about the fox hunting ban being lifted, about pretty much everything, the triple lock on pensions being removed, the inheritance tax stuff, pretty much everything that was in the Conservative Party manifesto has been abandoned, and we're not talking about any of that. So this is 2017 in a nutshell, because I think they're going after Corbyn for reasons that have nothing to do with Venezuela or hypocrisy or international geopolitics. They're going after Corbyn because they're spooked that there's going to be another general election before Christmas and he's very well placed to win it. However, and this is where being impartial is so flipping frustrating, they're right to go after him because he has been a blinking hypocrite. Discuss. 0345 6060 973. It's 11:30. Thank you for letting me just sort of dance around sometimes when the news is a little bit more complicated than most treatments of it allow, because I think this is really emblematic of our times. Jeremy Corbyn and Venezuela we're talking about. I've got phone lines free if you want to ring in. You got a better chance of getting through on a subject like this than most of the other stuff we discuss, because so few of us actually know what we're talking about. I'm not very well qualified to talk about Venezuela. I've been on a crash course on it, largely because I've been wondering why other people have suddenly appeared to cast themselves as experts. And here is what I think is happening, and then you tell me whether or not I'm right, or anything else that pops into your mind. This is what is happening, okay? And this is, I promise you, this is a political opinion-free analysis. Jeremy Corbyn's support for the Venezuelan model of socialism has been, over the years, pretty immense. The current president, Chavez's successor Maduro, is ostensibly part of the same process, part of the same government, or at least part of the same policy platform. So he is presiding over what is, by Latin American standards, pretty standard dictatorship, except he's supposed to be left-wing. Now, because Corbyn has offered so much support to the regime, past and present, the allegation of hypocrisy, I think, stands. I think it really does stand. It becomes doubly powerful because he casts himself as being a kind of moral arbiter. He condemned Theresa May as siding with the oppressor when she refused to condemn Donald Trump over his refugee ban. And yet when he's called upon to condemn President Maduro, he says, I condemn violence on all sides. Just that simple quote with regard to a refugee ban by Donald Trump, which is nowhere near on the same page as protesters being routinely killed in the street by government forces. He said, if you seek neutrality, you side with the oppressor. So I think by his own moral code, he is guilty of hypocrisy. But I also think that this story is getting way more heat and attention than it would under any objective measure, simply because Jeremy Corbyn's popularity is growing and Conservative fears of both a disastrous Brexit and an imminent general election mean they're desperate to find any hook they can to hang anti-Corbyn rhetoric on. So what are the two big anti-Corbyn stories of post-general election 2017? Just think about this for a minute, because a functioning democracy demands proper discourse. The two big anti-Jeremy Corbyn stories of 2017 have nothing to do with anything that was in the Labour Party manifesto. They are linked to something he didn't say in an interview with the NME and a condemnation he hasn't issued against the government in Venezuela. Now, unless this is an actual character assassination, I can't see what either of those stories have to do with the government of Britain. Right? So I believe he's a massive hypocrite, and I believe that the newspapers are going after him in a massively unbalanced, biased and unfair way. Where do I sit now? Who speaks for me politically? There's a huge conspiracy against Corbyn underway from what they like to call mainstream media, but people on his side think that that therefore insulates him from all meaningful criticism. So either, this is it, isn't it? These are the two sides of British politics now. Either everything he does is completely wrong, and we'll find some evidence of it, even if we have to trawl back through back issues of the New Musical Express, or he never ever does anything wrong, which is why any criticism of him whatsoever is part of a neoliberal conspiracy to send all our children up chimneys. Well, guess what? I agree with both sides sometimes. He's a hypocrite, and the newspapers are going after him in a very fraudulent and deceptive fashion. John's in Egham. John, help me out.
Good morning, James. First-time callers. I'm a bit nervous.
Don't be. It's only me. I'm calming down now.
You know, I totally agree with your last callers on the situations going on in Venezuela. I come from a Cuban heritage. My grandfather was the last president of the Supreme Courts in Cuba, so I understand communism. We want to call it socialism, but this is, you know, these are individualized trait of communism. In Cuba, it was called fidelismo. You know, you can call it chavismo for Venezuela, and really right now it's madurismo. And what Corbyn to actually, in a way, fight with, you know, Maduro's or Chavez's government and their way of government as, you know, that we have to, and I'm going to paraphrase, but we have to look at the positive things that he has done for the poorest in the country. The poorest in the country are also the ones that are uprising against him. The thing about that, we have to condemn both sides. Both sides. It's the government that's being repressive against the people.
Well, I think that's
it's the governments that have the arms, the guns, and that are shooting and killing people.
That's a given. No, I think you're right. Why do you think, John? Hang on. Whoa, hello. Why? I mean, what is happening in Yemen at the moment doesn't feature in British newspapers. What's happening in Turkey at the moment barely features in British newspapers. What's happening in the Crimea at the moment barely features in British newspapers. What's happening in huge swathes of the country. We never hear about Libya anymore, and we're responsible for the mess there. Why do you think the Venezuela story is getting so much coverage in the British newspapers?
Well, and James, I understand when you first said that, you know, you're trying to get your head around this yourself, and you're right. And this is probably
so you're another wealthy, like the earlier caller. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're another wealthy expat from South America.
I am not a wealthy expat from South America. I'm sorry, I'm not one like those. But
well, what are you then?
I'm Cuban, and we fought hard to get to where we're at today.
Yeah.
I'm an educator. I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
But my wife lived in Venezuela. I met my wife in Venezuela. I lived in Venezuela for.
So remind me the last time your wife's country received this sort of coverage in the British newspapers.
You know, the kind of coverage we get for Venezuela in our newspapers may be a 15-second, 20-second spot on television, and maybe a quarter page on the newspaper. So you're right. People are not informed of what's been going on for many, many years. You know, we're looking at it now at the boiling point where it's now overflowing to a point where people.
No, I get all of that. I sense you're only agreeing with one side
of hunger.
Yeah, I know. We've said all that. We've said all that. But why do you think it's getting so much coverage in the British media now, given that long list of countries I've just treated you to?
If there's anything that I can thank Jeremy Corbyn for, is for saying the ridiculous things that he said to I believe it was the Express, because I think that has triggered people to say, "Hey, what's going on in Venezuela?" And quite honestly, there's so
I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you again, John. I'm going to ask you again, even though you're not letting me. Why do you think Venezuela? You're married to a Venezuelan woman. We never ever read anything about Venezuela until relatively recently. Why do you think it's now getting coverage? It was on Newsnight last night. It's in the newspapers today. The journalists writing for some of these newspapers wouldn't be able to find Venezuela on a map. So why do you think Venezuela is big news in Britain at the moment?
You know, quite honestly, I'm not really sure about the politics of it because...
Really? Because you've run a politics program to offer an opinion.
I just think that you're looking at a country that's very rich in oil. This is going to have...
It's always been rich in oil. Why is it getting so much coverage in the British media at the moment?
Well, I just believe it's because it's getting a lot of coverage in the U.S. media as well, so it's kind of leaking over as well.
The Latin American and South American countries always get coverage in the US media. Your wife will tell you Venezuela never appeared in the British newspapers when we were growing up. Why do you think it's getting so much coverage now?
Yeah, I just think there's so much death and destruction and
not compared to Yemen.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think...
So why then? Why do you think Venezuela is getting so much coverage in British tabloid newspapers?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that one.
No, just have a think.
I really think that Jeremy, what's triggered me to call you, and this is, like I said, this is my first time calling.
Yes,
what triggered me to call you was you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn, and I read his statements on the Express. So
why would the Express? I mean, you can do a search on this. I used to work for the Express. I don't think we wrote a word about Venezuela for the best part of 20 years. Why do you think suddenly now problems in Venezuela are bigger news in the British tabloids than problems in Birmingham?
I have no idea. I wish I could answer that for you.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm sorry, I don't have...
Then I'll ask you one more question. One more question. Yeah. If Jeremy Corbyn had never said anything about Venezuela ever, do you think we'd be reading about it in the British tabloids on quite the scale that we are?
I think you would be hearing somewhat, but I think that Jeremy Corbyn has struck a chord.
Because you've answered your question now, you realise, without noticing. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Because no way would we be reading about Venezuela in the British newspapers if it wasn't for Jeremy Corbyn's historical connection with the country. No way at all. So when I asked you why you think we're reading so much about it now, you knew the answer. The answer is they're using it as a stick with which to beat Jeremy Corbyn.
And this is why I said that if there's anything I need to thank Jeremy Corbyn for, is for bringing this up. And to bring light into the public so that people really understand what's going on. Not that I'm minimizing what's going on in other parts of the world or even in our country.
But what you overlook is the choice that's made by people in my profession, because there are plenty of politicians speaking about the injustices unfolding in Turkey at the moment. There are plenty of people reporting upon the appalling abuses being issued from the White House itself. There are plenty of people describing the civil war in Yemen and elsewhere in the world where innocent people are dying on a daily basis. And those politicians are completely ignored by the right-wing British media. Those campaigners are completely ignored by the right-wing British media. The Venezuelan tragedy is real. Jeremy Corbyn's hypocrisy is real. But what you're not allowed to do is pretend that there's some sort of objective algorithm of story choice in place where every injustice, every oppression, every death of a civilian on the streets of a city gets equal weight. They're going after Corbyn, mate, because they want to go after Corbyn. They don't give a hoot about Venezuela.
Well, obviously, it triggered a political chord, didn't it? And that's what they're trying to. That's why they saw him touch on Venezuela and something that's horrific going on.
And that unfortunately isn't quite what you thought it was. Kind of thanking him for focusing attention on Venezuela, because none of the people cross about this story across about what's happening in Venezuela. They're just using it as an opportunity to accuse Corbyn of hypocrisy. And now my handcuffs go back on, because he is being a hypocrite. But the amount of attention being paid to his hypocrisy is completely bogus and biased. It's 11:46. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and oddly, I've been seeing it through the lens of football. Because if you're a neutral, or if, like me, your main team is never ever going to be appearing on the bigger stage. I support Kidderminster Harriers, so we dream of promotion into the league just below the league at the moment in the Vanarama National Northern Conference. But what that means is that if I'm watching, for example, with mates, I might be watching United Chelsea, and United score a brilliant goal, I really enjoy watching it, whereas my Chelsea supporting mates hate it. And politics has become like that. I don't know whether it's always been like that. Possibly it has. I don't think it has. I think we used to be a little more nuanced, a little bit more open-minded. But where politics is right now, and I think this is probably a symptom of the binary nature of Brexit and the cult almost of binary. You've got to be 100% on one side or 100% on the other. So what we've got now, and Jeremy Corbyn is the emblem of this, is you're either 100% pro or 100% anti. And most normal people, historically, would just base their opinion on the given evidence available. So on the evidence available, he's being a massive hypocrite over Venezuela. Also on the evidence available, the right-wing media are going after him in a completely unhinged and unbalanced way because they're terrified of his popularity. Why can't you hold both of those opinions? Why can't I say that without getting bombarded with people accusing me of being part of some anti-Corbyn conspiracy, and equally bombarded with people when I describe the media in those terms as being part of some sort of left-wing cabal? It's quite bonkers. It's exactly the same as watching football with die-hard fans, isn't it? You know, like if a foul takes place, and it's clearly a stone-cold foul, but if it's your fella that's done it, you sit there going, referee, it wasn't a foul at all. I enjoy it. I've got this sort of ability to step out of the fray as a Kidderminster Harriers fan. And yet when your team does something good, the other lot are never going to say, wow, that was very, very rarely. You get the occasional player like a Ryan Giggs, I suppose, or a Maradona who just never played in this country. But some players transcend club loyalty, and we all end up kind of having a soft spot for them. But that's where politics is now, and I don't know how we're going to fix it. I really don't. Because Jeremy Corbyn is getting a kicking over Venezuela because it's a sort of chink in his armour. That's all. It's a chink in the armour of his popularity. It's a valid accusation of hypocrisy. It doesn't mean he's wrong about anything else. It doesn't mean he's abandoned his manifesto pledges. Newspapers writing more about an interview in the NME that he gave 3 months ago than they are about the actual abandonment of an entire manifesto by the party that won the election. So I can say all of that. That's just fact. That's not opinion. But why can't I also say that on this issue he's being a massive hypocrite? What's the point of me being honest with you and saying sorry for getting it so wrong in the run-up to the general election? I'm sorry I didn't listen more to those of you who were telling me he was a much bigger deal than I realised. I should have listened more. It made me look silly. Never going to be one of those people who sort of just closes his eyes, sticks his fingers in his ears and pretends he hasn't noticed that the world has changed. Back to Brexit. So why can't I say now? It's a weird one, this. It really baffles me. Has politics always been like this and I just didn't notice? Until politics got really, really important and messy? Or are we living in an era where politics has been turned into sort of football-style loyalties? Gabriel's in Golders Green. Back to Venezuela, Gabriel. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question that your previous caller was so unwilling to answer is very simple. The reason it's getting so much attention in the press is absolutely just because Jeremy Corbyn does scare the right-wing press. His popularity has just soared and soared, and I think a huge part of that has been that even before he was leader of the party, before that, you look back at statements he's made and his voting record, and I think one thing that's very clear is he never did anything because it was popular. He never did anything because he thought he'd get in votes. He stuck to his morals, and what this
well, no, you're a supporter then. You're a big fan, right? I'm going to go out on a limb.
How could you tell?
Well, I couldn't tell necessarily. Don't undermine my brilliant analysis of your contribution to the programme. The reason you're a big supporter is because you said he's always honest. He's always... some people would disagree with that. But this, to tie the two together, his perception, I would say, his brand, what they sell is the idea that he's always honest. He always turns out to be right. I don't agree with it, but that's the perception. I'm not going to let you get away with just offering it up as a fact.
That's fair enough.
Cheers.
And I think, as much as it saddens me to say, as a Jeremy Corbyn supporter, yes, you are right, however, that, to stick to his morals and to stick to his, championing of peace, he does need to come out and...
no, he's abandoned his morals. Again, I'm not letting the semantics go unnoticed on this. He's not sticking to his morals. His morals say that if you try to be neutral when one side is being oppressed, then you side with the oppressor. That's his moral position. He's abandoned it on Venezuela.
Yes, I agree with you there. And I think he does desperately need to come out and speak against Venezuela in order to preserve that kind of the appearance that I certainly have of him as a moral champion of peace. And as tempting as it is for me to say, Theresa May, you see her with Saudi Arabians and Trump and shake hands and failing to do the same thing. As much as I want to say that, in the interest of being fair,
yes,
I think we need to hold them both to high standards, not low standards. You can't say, well, just because she ignores it, it's okay for him to ignore Venezuela.
Well, it's worse. It's worse for him because as you've just alluded to, the perception of him that he does nothing to diminish is as someone who's different from other politicians, who puts principle ahead of pragmatism or puts diplomacy ahead of reality. Theresa May's never pretended to be anything other than a pragmatic politician. Jeremy Corbyn has cast himself as a principled politician, so it's worse, his hypocrisy, than hers, much worse.
Perhaps, yeah, and I do worry if he doesn't do something soon. You know, whilst this shouldn't have been made as big a deal as it has, the fact is that now the situation. And if he doesn't come out and say something soon, I do fear I will have lost a certain amount of respect for him. I'll still believe in his policies and believe in what the party stands for, but in him as a person and as a leader and as a supposed champion of peace, I worry I'd lose. Yeah,
that's really honest of you. And unfortunately, I think that's probably why your kind of politics are on the back foot at the moment. I mean, because you're being open-minded and honest. You're saying, yeah, actually... do you think that explains the counter position, which is deep down they know they're on a wrong one here, but they're not going to admit it because the pressure is coming from historical enemies? No, we're not going to admit it because that would look like weakness. If we do it because the Daily Mail has told us to, or because a Sun columnist has told us to, couldn't even spell Venezuela last week, now it's the biggest story in town, we're not going to admit that we've been hypocrites because of who is telling us to do it.
I think it could be, because it then opens up a huge window that it would always be levelled again against him. The Venezuelan hypocrisy and how he had to be forced to speak against it by the press. It's just a bit of a mess, really.
Well, I think it is, although some people would disagree. Let me find a few of them. Justin says, again, at Mr. James O.B., maybe Corbyn knows more about the reality in Venezuela than you do. Ask what's really going on there instead. Well, that is, if you like, the kind of... Forgive me, Justin, but that's the opposite of Gabriel, who's also a fully paid-up member of the Jeremy Corbyn fan club, but isn't going to say, which I'm afraid is the mark of a cult, my leader understands it and nobody else does. That's why he's doing things that people find problematical. That makes you sound like a Donald Trump supporter, Justin, although I suspect you probably don't see it that way. Caroline says the hypocrisy of the whole situation, you agree with completely. It is hypocrisy from the media, hypocrisy from the man himself. I like this. I like this conversation a lot because it has sort of identified something that I felt bubbling away under the surface of our conversations for some time. And it's very specific to Jeremy Corbyn. It's actually a bit of a personal psychodrama for me as well, because you can't force everybody to be 100% on one side or the other. You know, that's the politics of Donald Trump. That's why he's telling lies now about his base growing, where all of the polling, all of the reports show that his base is shrinking fast. He's trying to sort of double down on that binary. You're either 100% with me, therefore you don't care whether I lie, you don't care whether I was put into the White House by Russia, you don't care whether my tax returns are going to show that I've been in the pockets of Russian gangsters for the best part of 20 years, perhaps. You don't care about any of this stuff. In fact, I'm even going to start my own television channel presented by my daughter-in-law because I know that you don't care about the truth. You just want to be told what you want to hear. That's where we go. But on the other hand, I don't like living in a country where so much of the media is so horribly weighted and so viciously biased against the leader of the opposition. Is it worse for Corbyn than it was for Miliband? I'm not sure it is, but because Corbyn in some ways refuses to play the game, the occasions when he really should play the game kind of stick in the craw.